Welcome to Choose Courage Inc., where we skip the boring intros and jump straight into reimagining business and workplace experiences with We Ain't Afraid to Go There conversations. And I'm so excited to share this conversation with Kevin Bethune, designer, author, and someone who's been navigating the intersection of creativity, business, and belonging for years. In this episode, we talk about what happens when your ideas don't fit inside the rooms you're in, how to find the courage to build your own space, and why emotion, imagination, and confrontation are actually critical design tools. And we don't stop there. We get into the real stuff. We talk about what does it mean to protect your spirit in corporate spaces, how we stay true to ourselves while navigating power dynamics, and why so many of us are craving a different kind of creativity. So if you've ever felt too much for the workplace or wondered if your ideas are just a little too bold, this one's for you. I'm just excited to chat with you today and just to dive into a lot of things that I know are near and dear to both of us. And thought it'd maybe be fun to start off with, especially as we're thinking about creativity, coloring outside the lines, challenging the status quo. When was the last time you thought to yourself, if I tell people what I'm really trying to do, they might think I'm crazy?
Oh, goodness. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it. Always good to talk. I'm probably going through a moment right now where, not to be overly promotional, but I'm in the throes of releasing a new book. It's been out about 5 weeks now. And honestly, it's been a cathartic release around the books are a reflection of perhaps the professional and personal sort of lived experience that you were a part of. And these perspectives ideally can help someone else. So when you get that out of your brain at the text, the brain is sort of freed up to think about, okay, what's next to go learn or what's next to go do? And I think through that cathartic release, which I'm grateful for, I am in a mode where I'm just wondering, okay, what is that next thing? And I am giving myself a moment to remember what I love about being creative. And for me, most of my career has been in physical making, physical product creation. Mm-hmm. And I kind of would just want to go make stuff. I don't want to concern myself with scaling digital platform, feeding into capitalist engines and all these things. I just want to almost put myself away, almost like in a monastery, and make crafted things that
Listen, take all of us with you. We're ready.
So that's where my head is at. How can I make that, boutique, studio, whatever sort of happen where I'm just making things that I believe in and want to put into the world?
Yeah, I feel that. For me, it's been just a moment of a reality check of reminding myself, we're all going to be dead in 60 whatever years. Technically, none of this actually matters. So why not try and do the best that I can in this world? Why not try and be the most creative? Why not try something different? So yeah, that deeply resonates. Yeah.
And always admired your courage because you've started a few businesses over the last handful of years. And, I feel your bold conviction, your purpose, your passion coming forth when you announce what you're doing or when you give updates about what you're doing. So just know that you've always inspired me in terms of the courage that you exemplify.
I love that. Yo, thank you.
Of course.
It's so funny. So I was reflecting on how we met, and I believe we were both speaking at this MIT conference, and we had dinner afterwards. And I remember probably annoying you and being like, this is my extroverted friend, because you definitely were not being extroverted. And I'm just so glad over the years we've stayed in touch, and it's been just such a treat to watch your journey as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I definitely am a hyper introvert, so I appreciate you being the buddy of mine at the dinner.
Yeah. I mean, when I think about, I feel like I have these moments often, honestly, yesterday, even maybe earlier today, of if people really knew just what I'm trying to do or what I'm thinking about, they would think I was out of pocket. Right now I own two businesses. One's a consultancy where I mainly work with organizations around organizational trauma and helping leadership be less harmful to themselves and to other people. And then there was a season a year and a half ago where I'm just creating from a place of chaos and crisis all the time. I love my work. It's rewarding. I get to see a lot of cool things behind the scenes, but it's chaotic. It's corporate America. And I really want to create more from a place of joy and wonder.
Mm.
And what started as a passion project has turned into another business. And I was building a astrology for pets app.
Astrology for pets. Okay.
Astrology for pets. Listen, and it's been so fun because I've done a couple live events, and it's just nice to see people happy.
Mm. Mm. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know, right? Just something so small. They're just happy that they're gushing about their pet, their dog, and just talking about that relationship.
Mhm.
I'm curious about, as you think about building and being creative in some of these new spaces you're toying with, how do you manage or think about the role of emotion in the midst of that?
I think a lot about it actually. And forgive me if I've ever mentioned this before, but one of those physical product categories that I just am in love with throughout my whole life, before I knew I wanted to be a designer even. I love audio products, kind of weirdly.
Okay.
You might, some people might call those kind of folks like audiophiles, where you just geek out over hardware in your home related to acoustic reproduction or even portable, gear. But audio hardware is a nerd passion of mine. But beyond just the industrial design of this stuff, my mind is acutely consumed with the ritual around music, because I remember Dad's stereo and the vinyls, and as busy as my parents were, both working parents, where they would, part of our joy in the household was them pulling out records and remembering, the music that they loved when they were kids, and the Motown and these kind of things, and what it meant for my dad to sort of open up the stereo equipment and make it just sort of fill the house with sounds. That was a ritual. And that, anytime I listen to music, it evokes memories. One of the cool things that we did in our last job was we created a little den space in the innovation studio, this little kind of room behind the corner where we would have the vinyl sessions. And, we would advertise, hey, we're going to play this record starting at 6:30 p.m. And people would sort of linger around and stay for that. And, it was a chance for everyone to decompress off the busy workday. And we just enjoyed a good record. So sometimes people brought in their scotch or whatever, but we just made it a ritual, for the team. It was a great bonding moment for folks that were just into music. So the notion of emotion, ritual, and memories, those are things that are sort of in my mind right now.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from that is it is grounded on a focus around connection versus consumption first, right?
Love it.
And also it's being willing to kind of step outside the norm of maybe what's expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think too that that's an important note for folks who might be listening in who are thinking about maybe they have an idea or a dream or curiosity, and what's holding them back is what other people might be thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the takeaway here for those who are listening is that one, you don't exist for people's consumption.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're not feeling it or vibing with it, that's fine.
Yeah.
You may not be everyone's cup of tea, but whose you are, you'll be in a big way. And the second thing too is I think a lot of us are just craving something different.
Mm-hmm.
And you might not even realize that there's someone who is unaware that they're waiting for you to show up with your idea.
Mm.
And so why not?
I love it. You kind of give people permission when they see a different example out there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think in this day and age, a lot of us, I think when you are in times of chronic chaos and crisis, you get curious about what else there could be. And that's actually hope, right? And so we have two options. We can either just allow that hope to fester and become a dream deferred, right? Or we can actually act on it, which hope is action instead of this wishful thinking.
I love that.
Yeah. I want to dive a little bit into some of the things that are probably relevant and related to your book and some of the things you've been working on, and this idea specifically around just multidisciplinary innovation. And I feel that sounds like an exciting concept and an idea, but when have you felt just completely out of your depth? You didn't belong in the room. And how did you work through that as you're kind of recalibrating your relationship to this idea of being innovative?
Yeah, it does make me reflect. And my answer is almost in the form of a from to. I think early in my career, I'd been in part of large organizations where the job description was pretty clear. And granted, my curiosities took me from perhaps one type of interdisciplinary work to another, whether it was engineering to business. But then when I started weaving design into my professional path, the job opportunities I was a part of became a lot more ambiguous, unclear. And thankfully, I had the privilege of helping to shape what you would call multidisciplinary runways of opportunity. And it was rounding the bend of when I formalized my design education after, again, chapters in engineering and business. So it was a bold move to sort of say, I want to position my career for multidisciplinary innovation for the rest of my career. I want to work in these intersections and not ask for permission anymore from any brand. I want to do this work for myself. And thankfully, I met a small group of business partners where we had a similar view on the future, that it was multidisciplinary, that it made sense to work this way. But those business partners had come from extensive, lineages of experience at places like McKinsey and private equity. They had worked in these tier one spaces. They were used to being in corporate boardrooms and with founding teams and executives. And, they had I guess they had a comfort level with this notion of alpha problem solving. They were used to being the alpha dog in the room, typically, unfortunately, mostly male rooms, mostly rooms with, perceived esteem of power and privilege in terms of where folks were coming from that they were used to collaborating with. And so there was a style of like alpha gravity in the room that I wasn't comfortable with, because, me, I'm not that alpha person in most rooms. I'm the introvert. I tend to reflect more than I, contribute initially. But these folks were laddering off each other at hyper speed. And it felt like, just jarring for me when I started getting invited into these rooms. And to their credit, they invited me along because they were curious about the creative contributions I could make as a creative co-founders to that early engine we were creating. But I'm getting thrust into these boardrooms for some of their corporate partner clients. And they're literally problem solving live with these executives, looking them in the eye. It was a style of collaboration and communication that wasn't your typical PowerPoint presentation. They were just trying to garner relationships with these folks. They were trying to riff on each other and suss out what potential innovation opportunity might emerge from the conversations. But it was really fast, additive problem solving that I wasn't used to. And, you wonder, to your point, do I belong here? Am I out of my depth? Wow, these folks are like the initial inclinations I'm feeling inside of, wow, these people are incredibly smart, incredibly connected. What do I do? But eventually I had to quiet myself down. I had to quiet that inner anxiety down and say, well, I'm smart too. I've done things too. I recognize certain patterns here of what's being discussed. And I sort of retreated inside initially and just remember the things that I feel are important, the human-centered imperatives that maybe they're not discussing, the cultural nuances that maybe aren't being addressed and what they're talking about, because they're talking about people at the end of the day. They're talking about target audiences that need to be served. And maybe they're not talking about some of the context that I remember from my own lived experience. And I can only speak for me as a Black man navigating corporate spaces, but I think of nuances that maybe they're not discussing that are important. So I figured out over time, I had to figure out ways to experiment, the ways that I could interject into the conversation, and ideally not try to mimic them or try to feel like I have to assimilate to what style they're exemplifying, that it was okay to just be me and give myself permission to be me. And I remember, just to tie a bow on the answer to your question, I do remember when I had these moments of truth where I learned to be me in those moments. So without anyone asking, I felt this inner conviction to just get up out of the chair as they're talking and they're hyper help them and sort of mannerisms. I felt this inclination to get up out of the chair and walk over to the whiteboard in this boardroom. And I just started drawing what the room was discussing, literally drawing journeys and storyboards and stacks and all kinds of schematics and infographics. And I noticed I could get the room's attention away from their hyper conversation And the mood, the mindsets, the attention would shift over to the whiteboard. And it gave me an open door to then interject and explain what I just drew. That was synthesizing of the conversation, but also giving me the doorways to interject some of those other imperatives that I felt needed to be sort of addressed. And the moment I did that, my bosses in the room, my stakeholders fell in love. They fell in love with that and only wanted more of that unique contribution that only I could offer in those moments.
Yeah. You were like, boys, focus. Focus. Over here. I mean, that example, though, my mind immediately goes to what is happening at Meta and this huge culture shift that's happening in a very unhealthy way. So I'm curious, what would you say for folks who are feeling like they don't belong in the room because the room is literally being designed in a certain way that isn't going to be inclusive of some folks? What would you speak into those folks of what to think about, how to show up, and what to consider in this moment?
Yeah. I mean, I think right now we do see a lot of rhetoric that's just loud and noisy, whether it's masculine energy in the Meta example or
quote unquote masculine energy.
Goodness.
Relax.
Simmer down.
Yeah, boys.
At the end of the day, if we're truly about serving target audiences as much as these companies claim they're serving them, unfortunately, a lot of the rooms that we're in, and I can only speak for me, it never feels great to be the only one most of the time, the only Black male in the room, or the only Black woman, or the only non-binary person in the room. It doesn't necessarily feel good to feel that cognitive dissonance, because when you look outside those company walls or outside of those boardrooms, the world is this beautiful tapestry. And oh, by the way, the world is so much smaller and getting smaller exponentially thanks to digital computation, generative AI. We can see each other so vividly, so clearly now, more than ever. And any audience, any marketplace that we claim to be serving is this beautiful intersectional tapestry of people. And that doesn't exist in a lot of these spaces, a lot of these rooms that we're navigating. So for anyone that's feeling like the other in those rooms, it's like, why not you? And if anything, absolutely you, because usually your voice is missing. And not just from a moral perspective. Ideally, we all share a moral imperative to be inclusive. You hope that people feel that moral imperative. Not always, as we see, but most people, you hope there's good intent there. But we're actually kind of dumb from a business opportunity if we don't recognize that there's cognitive dissonance, that the inclusion or lack thereof creates mismatches and all kinds of problems, exacerbates harm, all those things. So if you're feeling like the other, it's like, absolutely, you need to find your authentic voice. I wouldn't say speak up, because again, I don't think our purpose to be there is to assimilate into that culture, into that masculine energy, or to that alpha style of capitalism that clearly isn't working when we look around us. So when you're there in the room, definitely feeling like the underrepresented person, why not you? And then absolutely you, because your voice is probably the most important to speak up and speak up in your own way. And the cool thing too is I think I've learned that leadership can be different. You can be that introvert. You can be that maker who leads by the example of your craft, example of how you collaborate and communicate. That should be valued, and you should feel confident and bring that best representation to the party.
Hey, this is Viviane, and I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. And I just wanted to pause for a quick moment to say that this podcast is ad-free on purpose. And we want to keep it that way so that it feels like a space that's just for us and just a little bit more divorced from noise on what we should buy and what we should consume. And so the best way to help us do that is by sharing it with someone you think would really connect with it, someone who you think would feel encouraged or get something out of this episode, or by leaving an honest review, because it helps more folks find us. And honestly, it could be the exact thing someone else needed to hear today, just because you took a moment to spread the word. So thanks for being here. I appreciate you, and let's get back to it. Yeah, no, I appreciate those notes. And I know for me, I'm more confrontational. So I've had to learn over the years of when to use that for good. I don't
Mm,
think being confrontational is bad. I actually think it's a gift. But how do you use it and when to use it?
mm,
So I love, for example, I would actually even your example of drawing on the board and kind of synthesizing and pulling people away is a form of confrontation, right?
mm,
You're
mm,
getting people to have this moment of pause.
mm,
Confrontation for me is about creating a moment of pause. There's different ways to do that. There's different ways that pause can play out. And so I know there have been times where if here's an example. I remember when I was at Salesforce, I was working on a project with a bunch of executives who clearly needed help, but they also were just too prideful to think about other ways outside of the things that they were trying to deal with. And so I could do a PowerPoint presentation about the data and I could ask questions to lead a discussion, but I actually ended up leaning a little bit on my experience in play therapy. And I
mm,
created
mm,
this activity where we could talk about this hard thing that they're too prideful to admit that they don't know what the F they're doing. And they also don't know how to ask for help. So, how do I use something like play or an activity in order to get them to look at old problems in new ways?
mm,
It's
mm,
still around the agenda of progress and a solution, but I'm
mm,
doing it through a different means and a medium. But that's a
mm,
form of confrontation
mm,
because at the end of
mm.
the day, I want them to pause. I want them to be able to think. And even when I'm speaking, whether it's a training or a talk, I tell my business partner this often of like, I want to be that haunting thought to them in the middle of the night. I want them to have this moment of confrontation with themselves or their ideas that they're thinking about me in the middle of the night. I'm that intrusive thought at dinner. That's what I want to be for those people. But that means we have to be creative then, right? And how we're confronting these folks and in these rooms.
I love that. Interesting visuals are coming to mind.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I love what you're describing though, because sometimes I don't know how you feel, but in some of those rooms, sometimes there's an invisible authority figure in the room sitting in the back corner. And I call that authority figure speed.
Mm,
To take that pause. I love that you
yeah.
describe it as a, sort of a healthy moment of
Confrontation.
conflict, confrontation, conflict. It's like
Yeah.
that's healthy. Slow
Yeah,
that
yeah.
speed down.
Absolutely. And I think too, when I think about there's one story, especially when I think about when I felt out of depth, where I
Mm,
felt like I didn't belong in a room. And it was again when I was working at Salesforce and I was working in the Office of Innovation, ironically, who really struggled to think outside the box with new ideas and new perspectives. And I remember talking to a good friend of mine, I have these ideas around what does it actually mean to be innovative,
mm,
to approach innovation from a lens that is not built from unchecked privilege and exclusion. And it just feels like they're not feeling it. And it
mm,
feels like when I'm in the room, it's like going over people's heads.
mm,
And she's like, well, go build it without them. And
mm,
she was basically encouraging me, okay, if you don't feel like you belong in the room, maybe you're too big for the room. Maybe your ideas don't belong in that room because they won't
mm,
be good stewards of that idea or that vision.
mm-hmm.
And that's how Humanity Centered was born.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, not a lot of people know that story, but it actually came from her.
Oh goodness. Wow.
Hmm, hmm.
Well, kudos for you for connecting to that, crafting your own vision of that, and building what you've built. It's been
Yeah, no,
impressive to watch.
I appreciate it. I mean, but I want for folks who are listening, that doesn't mean you need to go and build your own business. But what it does mean is you don't have to keep yourself and your ideas in a cage.
Mm, mm-hmm,
Find the appropriate outlet or place for them. Don't allow that thing just fester and wither away. Because I
mm,
think that's how people's spirits get broken in the workplace.
mm. Yep. That definitely resonates from past experiences. Absolutely.
Mm. How did you, I guess, in those moments, how did you protect your spirit? How did you, or even maybe if your spirit was broken, how did you nurture it back to a better place?
You mentioned Salesforce. I definitely connect your experiences to memories of what it was like, navigating Nike. So in some ways, there were probably parallels between our experiences between Salesforce and Nike, and that I was curious about design. I was seeing design for the first time in that environment. I was curious about innovation. Again, coming from an engineering and business background, learning about design sort of through side hustles. I had conventional jobs in the Nike environment, but I was designing shoes in the early mornings and late nights, weekends, just to learn how design could fold into my life. And it wasn't always celebrated that what I was doing to learn. It was like, we don't see you doing that. We don't see you being a part of this world. And also being almost like criticized because my journey wasn't born at a place like a Nike. It didn't start there. So it's like to be told, oh, for this next more creative job that you want to interview for it, if it's between you and someone that was born here, and spent 10 to 15 of the, career years here, we're going to pick that person every time because they're worth more. Their experience is worth more than your lived experience. That's literally what I was being told. And so you can kind of lose a little bit of yourself of like, what choices do I have then? Do I further attempt to assimilate? Do I keep hustling and until you validate me? And is that going to take 10 to 15 years? Is the things that I've done before this place have any worth? Do I discount that myself? Do I, let go and just fall into the currents of what this organization will give me? Or to your point, into what you did, do you build your own sort of world, build your own reality? And eventually I had to do that, but it was very difficult.
Yeah. It reminds me of this quote. I think it's Jim Rohn who says it. He says, the best way to predict your future is to create it.
Love it.
And I hope people give themselves that permission, especially as we're kind of seeing how the economy's acting, how employees are acting. Like, my hope is that folks remember just how short life is and how great their life could be.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
Yeah. But I think in order to even, again, be pulled towards that, we have to expose ourselves to different ways of thinking and different ways of moving in the world, in the workplace, and in our relationship with imagination and creativity. And I think a lot of times in corporate, we're told to look at folks who've been in the industry for all these years, or they built these huge companies. You see a lot of podcasts where it's like, let's talk to the CMO of whatever this company is. But I feel there is something to be said of actually going to and leaning on folks who are younger than us. And just seeing the world and getting ideas from that side of the spectrum. And so I'm curious, maybe if you're able to share of a conversation or an experience that you remember with someone that was younger that changed your perspective on what's possible.
Oh goodness. I love my young mentors. I have a handful of them. One gentleman that I eventually met through the Nike network, he was actually a Nike sponsored athlete, still is actually. He was the only BMX athlete, BMX biking, the only BMX athlete that never competed in a BMX sort of meet officially.
Interesting.
But at a young age, he became sponsored by all these BMX brands. And the reason why, of course, he had his craft around BMX riding and the tricks and the athleticism associated with it. But he started taking cameras with him. And he was one of the first folks I remember that created a massive following on YouTube because of he and his photography buddy would just tear through the streets of different cities in the world and show from a first person perspective of someone on a bike what the world is about. And literally he would show, these videos where he would tear through these cities, do all these tricks, amazing tricks. But you would see all of his celebrity friends from all walks of life, from fashion, culture, music, sports. And it would be the city tour on a BMX bike. And the amount of sponsorship, ambassadorship opportunities, and all these things. Literally, he's got the Jordan brand within Nike, creating shoes dedicated to him. So this person is Nigel Sylvester, Queens native, based in Brooklyn, but he's literally lapping the earth every week, it seems, just showing what is possible through his love of being on the bike. And all the cultural forces and halos that are in his wake. It's been quite incredible to watch. And so, I wouldn't call him a BMX athlete first. I would call him a content visionary first in terms of the power of storytelling. And he's taught me a lot about, based on where his anchor is, which is the bike, it makes me think of where are my anchors. Mine might be the pencil, the power of the pencil and creative expression and what stories can emerge. He's created his own world. And it makes me believe that it's possible to create my own realities as well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I'm hearing about that is don't keep yourself within the box that people put you in light of titles and labels.
Amen.
That's it. That's the podcast. We're just going to wrap there. And no, that's so important because I think a lot of people, you see some of this too a little bit on LinkedIn where, first of all, sometimes on LinkedIn, I'm like, do these people realize we're all going to die one day? But I digress. But you also just see people, they're white knuckling their title, how people see them. Any post that begins with, I've been doing this for 20, I just immediately skip. But people, again, they hold on to that because I think sometimes the familiar is a lot more comfortable than the discomfort that is required to do something great.
No, I love that. That title, that tenure might be sort of golden handcuffs that prevent you from really liberating yourself to really find your true purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Even I know last fall, I publicly shared that I was distancing myself, stepping away from the UX industry. And I remember it took me a little bit to make that decision, in part because I was like, okay, if I do this, some people then might think Humanity Center doesn't exist anymore, which it does. And honestly, only even 30% of our client work is with UX folks. It could hurt that brand, that business, but I needed to cut the dead weight. I needed to give myself an opportunity to lean more into the things that really excite me, which is, yes, entrepreneurship, but it's also the strategic consulting that we do within Humanity Centered. But I need to distance myself. And so that's meant I've walked away from a lot of invitations to speak this year. It's meant when some people are wanting to interview me on a podcast about UX and things like that, I'm like, no. But it's an attempt to give myself space, really to give creativity space to take on a new form in my life.
I love that. And honestly, what you described as dead weight, it resonates because if any field requires a reimagination, it's UX right now. And, generative AI as just one of the many catalysts of what's going to either make or break the field, it's needed. So.
Yeah. That whole industry just needs a refresh.
Yeah.
Honestly, secretly, I think I was talking about this with Lauren Salenza on another episode with her. And we were talking about how with UX conferences, honestly, I think it's good. A lot of them are closing down. I think there's another way for us to be creative and thoughtful and actually communal in how we connect over things like design. And if that means that those business models need to change, where they can't necessarily build their whole business off of asking daddy, aka these other employers and companies to sponsor them, then I think that'll be great. That'll be great for the industry.
Yeah. Very cool.
All right, y'all, don't send me a bunch of emails about how you hate me now because I'm okay with these conferences going away. But I do think times of disruption and chaos and failure and disappointment lead to new things. But that's also about understanding that even business, it's not linear, it's cyclical. I was listening to this on a podcast the other day, and he was talking about how business is cyclical and that it starts with failure. And from failure, we then learn. So failure to learning, which then leads to success, which then can lead to stagnation. And And then that can also then lead to another point of failure. And you're just kind of going in these cycles
Totally.
over and over again.
I totally agree. I sort of see an S curve by what you just described. And there's every industry has these like pace of S curve renewals, call them renewal curves. And, I think we went through an S curve around digital where design as a field exploded into so many categories. Of what type of design do you mean when it comes to helping these companies digitally transform themselves? And, the front end experience and the back end and all the ways that we talk about experience, I think unfortunately over-rotated into such a digital language and a digital set of subspecialties where we almost forget what is the true art of creativity across that to make sure that we're showing up for people in the most humane and sensible way. It gets lost in the digital rhetoric. And right now, a major disruptive force in generative AI sort of blowing all that up and saying, what is a design system then? What is a user experience then when we have to weave all these different ingredients together? So.
Yeah. And if anything, I think it's exposing how just like a general lack of creativity in the UX industry. Because right now people, instead of being creative and curious about, okay, what does this mean? How do I relate to this? We did when we had the switch into digital. They are relating to it from a place of fear and just like flat out rejection. Or they're just like, this is bad, but their ethics are so shallow that they can't go beyond this is bad and I hate this. So it's an invitation actually for us to be curious.
Yes.
To be, how do we engage this from a place of wonder? Both in terms of what's possible, but also then even being creative around how do we protect people? How do we be more human-centered in this? Yeah, as I'm thinking about kind of my experience with someone that was younger, that kind of challenged my perspective on what's possible. I love just being a part of different communities and seeing how they do community. And I'm a part of this real estate community where this real estate community is all about this specific investor strategy. And I won't get into it because it'll take too long to talk about it. But essentially, I was watching this webinar between the founder of this group and this like 20-year-old. And through this investment strategy, which is called Subject to, if you're curious, you want to go down that rabbit hole. She had gained about 10 or 12 properties. And she's like 21.
Oh, wow.
No, for those who are listening, she doesn't come from some white wealthy family. But she was using this strategy to just figure it out. How do I move within this system in a different way to acquire these properties that I want? And I was just inspired by that. Here's this 20-something opening 10 plus whatever properties because she was just committed to learning and figuring out a different way of getting properties. Wow. Besides going through the typical, let me get approved for a mortgage route, which I think a lot of us are taught. That's how you buy a property. You go to the bank, get a mortgage. There's actually a bunch of different creative financing ways to do it. And this young 20-something figured it out.
That's cool.
And she has all these properties. It inspired me to recommit to a discipline of learning.
Yep. Yeah. Like what are the hacks? What are the alternative routes? What are the possibilities?
Yeah, exactly. If I don't feel like I can buy a house right now in this market, there has to be a way. The world is too big for this just to be one way for this to be done. So let me get curious and see what's possible. And in doing so, finding other communities who are all about that. There are whole communities that are about creative financing and real estate.
I love it.
And how to get properties with little to barely any down. There's all these things. And what I love about those communities is just in general, they're creative. Everyone's curious. Everyone's asking questions. They're sharing. They're so generous in their ideas and what they're learning as well. It's a big vibe. And it's something that I feel like a lot of us could learn from.
Very cool. There you go. Great example.
Thanks for hanging out with us and diving into some of these real and unfiltered conversations. We know your time is valuable, and so we don't take it for granted. If today's episode made you think, if it challenged you, or gave you something new to consider, we'd love for you to hit that follow button on whatever streaming service you're using. That way, you'll never miss an episode when we drop them. And if you want to go even deeper, sign up for our newsletter at choosecourageinc.com, and you'll get updates on new episodes, access to exclusive freebies, and first dibs on coaching opportunities and other resources to help you make bold moves in your life and business. So we appreciate you, we see you, and we're rooting for you. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort, and a friendly reminder to drink some water.